Jasmine stood in the courthouse hallway, the cold marble floors reflecting the harsh fluorescent lights above. She adjusted the hem of her skirt, trying to calm the storm brewing in her chest. This wasn't just any ordinary day, it was her first time in court, and her future hung in the balance. The weight of the situation settled heavily on her shoulders as she glanced at the closed door to the courtroom. How did I even get here, she wondered for the millionth time. It all started a few weeks ago when a fight broke out in the hallway at her high school. Jasmine had been trying to stop a confrontation between two classmates when things escalated. One of the students, in a fit of rage, had shoved her, and she fell into a teacher's desk. The next thing Jasmine knew, the school administration had suspended her. The situation was clear in her mind, she was just trying to stop the fight, but to the school officials, she had become the scapegoat. The truth didn't seem to matter to them. And now, here she was, about to face a judge who, judging by the rumors, probably wouldn't give her a chance in hell. Jasmine took a deep breath and straightened her back. She wasn't going to let them see her sweat. She wasn't the kind of person who gave up, no matter how tough things got. The door to the courtroom opened, and a man in a suit walked out. His eyes met hers for a brief moment, and he offered a slight, knowing smile before continuing down the hallway. Jasmine's stomach twisted. That was him, the judge, Judge Palmer. He was infamous for dismissing cases before even hearing them, especially when it came to young black teens like her. "Miss Williams, please come in," the bailiff called, his voice stern yet somehow gentle. Her heart raced, but Jasmine nodded and walked into the courtroom, head held high. The room was silent, save for the shuffle of papers on the desk and the tapping of a gavel. She could feel the eyes on her as she made her way to the defendant's table, the whispers of the courtroom almost deafening. "Your Honor," the prosecutor began, standing up and adjusting his glasses, "we're here today to discuss the actions of this young woman, Jasmine Williams. As you can see from the evidence, she was involved in a fight at her school." "Objection." Jasmine interrupted, shocking everyone in the room, including herself. The prosecutor froze, his mouth opening and closing, clearly thrown off by her interruption. "On what grounds?" Judge Palmer asked, a smirk creeping up on his face. Jasmine could see the way he was looking at her, like she was some kid who didn't know better. "I believe the situation has been misrepresented," Jasmine said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "I wasn't involved in the fight. I was trying to stop it." Judge Palmer raised an eyebrow. "Interesting," he said, tapping his pen against his desk. "I'm curious. What makes you think you're qualified to defend yourself, Miss Williams?" The question hit her like a slap in the face. Jasmine took a step back, looking at the judge with a determination that she hadn't even realized she had in her. "I've studied the law," she said, each word coming out more forcefully than the last. "I've read case law. I understand my rights, and I have the ability to present my side of the story." The room fell into an awkward silence. The judge's face twitched, clearly not expecting such a bold response from a teenager. The prosecutor chuckled under his breath, and Jasmine could hear him muttering something to his colleague. She knew what they were thinking, just another kid who didn't know her place. "You're wasting our time, Miss Williams," Judge Palmer said dismissively, rolling his eyes. "This is a court of law, not a classroom." Jasmine's heart hammered in her chest. She had expected something like this, but hearing it still stung. The judge's dismissive tone sent a wave of frustration through her. She had come here today with nothing but her voice, and it felt like the entire room was against her. But Jasmine wasn't about to back down. She knew this wasn't just about her. This was about showing the world that she wasn't just a statistic or a stereotype. She had spent years in the shadows of other people's expectations, but today, she would stand tall. She was going to fight, and she wasn't going to let anyone silence her. Taking a deep breath, Jasmine stood up straighter. "Your Honor," she began, her voice calmer now but still filled with conviction, "I know I might be young, but I understand the law. I understand what's at stake here, not just for me, but for everyone who's ever been overlooked or underestimated. I deserve the right to defend myself. For the first time since entering the courtroom, Jasmine saw something flicker in Judge Palmer's eyes. It wasn't sympathy, but it was something close, respect, maybe. It didn't change the fact that he clearly wasn't going to make things easy for her, but at least he wasn't outright dismissing her. The judge cleared his throat and nodded. Very well, Miss Williams. I'll allow you to continue. But know this, I'm not here to play games. If you're going to represent yourself, you'd better be prepared. I am, Your Honor, Jasmine replied, her voice firm. I'm ready. Judge Palmer leaned back in his chair, clearly unimpressed but intrigued. Let's see what you've got then. As the proceedings continued, Jasmine could feel the weight of the courtroom pressing down on her. But she also felt something else, a spark of excitement. This was her moment. This was the first step in proving everyone wrong. And she wasn't going to let it slip away. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Jasmine Williams wasn't born into a world of luxury. Her childhood had been anything but easy, shaped by the constant struggle that so many in her neighborhood faced. But it was in this very struggle that Jasmine found her fire, the fuel that would one day propel her toward a future she was determined to create. She lived in a modest apartment on the outskirts of a bustling city. Her mother, a nurse, worked long hours at a local hospital, often sacrificing time with Jasmine to make ends meet. Her father, absent from the picture since she was young, left behind nothing but a hole in their family that Jasmine never quite understood. Despite this, her mother had always been a beacon of strength, working tirelessly to provide for them both. Jasmine remembered the days when her mom would sit at the kitchen table, paying bills while Jasmine did her homework. The kitchen was small, and the smell of home-cooked meals often mingled with the scent of old wood and paper. Her mom would smile at her and encourage her to keep going, to not let anything hold her back. Jazz, her mom would say, the world will try to tell you you're not enough. But I want you to know, you're more than enough. You've got a mind that can change the world if you choose to use it. It was those words that kept Jasmine going through the toughest times. School was never easy for her, but it wasn't the academic struggles that bothered her. It was the feeling of always being seen as less. She was a black teenager in a predominantly white school, and she often felt like an outsider. People saw her as a stereotype, the angry black girl, the troublemaker, the one who couldn't fit in. But what they didn't know was how hard she fought to rise above it all. She excelled in her studies, particularly in history and government. It was in those subjects that Jasmine found her calling, her passion for justice and fairness. But there was a catch. Jasmine was often told, either directly or indirectly, that her aspirations were out of her reach. She was constantly reminded that people like her didn't make it in law. People like her didn't get to change the system, they were the ones the system was built to control. But Jasmine didn't let those thoughts control her. Instead, she clung to the lessons her grandmother had taught her. Her grandmother, a fiery woman with a sharp wit and unyielding sense of justice, was the person who first opened Jasmine's eyes to the power of the law. Every Sunday afternoon, they would sit together at the kitchen table, the smell of coffee filling the air, and discuss the latest news. Her grandmother, who had lived through segregation, often told Jasmine stories about the civil rights movement, about the courage it took to stand up against overwhelming odds. We fought for the right to be heard, she would say. And now, you've got that right, Jazz. You've got to use it. Don't ever let anyone make you feel like you don't deserve to be heard. It was these conversations with her grandmother that made Jasmine realize that the law wasn't just a set of rules, it was a tool. A tool for change, a weapon for justice. And she was going to wield it. As she entered high school, Jasmine became more and more involved in activities that would shape her future. She joined the debate team, not because she was the loudest, but because she knew how powerful words could be. She volunteered for student government, using her position to advocate for underrepresented students. But even in these spaces, she often faced criticism. The whispers behind her back never stopped. She's just doing it for attention. She thinks she's better than everyone else. Who does she think she is, trying to act all high and mighty? It wasn't easy to ignore the judgment, but Jasmine learned to rise above it. She kept pushing forward, no matter how much people tried to bring her down. Every time someone tried to make her feel small, she remembered her mother's words, "You're more than enough." It was in her sophomore year that Jasmine first discovered her love for law. One day, while browsing through the library, she stumbled upon a book about civil rights law. She couldn't put it down. The stories of people who had fought for justice, who had taken on the system and won, ignited something in her. She began reading everything she could find about the law, about how it had been used to oppress people, and how it had been used to free them. The more she read, the more she realized that this was the path she was meant to follow. Jasmine wasn't just interested in law because it seemed like the right thing to do. She was drawn to it because she had experienced firsthand how broken the system could be. She had seen the prejudice in her own community, the unfair treatment in her school, and the constant battle to be treated like everyone else. She wanted to change that. She wanted to be the person who helped people like her, people who were overlooked and underestimated. By the time Jasmine turned 16, she had already started researching local law firms and reaching out to mentors who could guide her. She wasn't naive. She knew it wouldn't be easy. She knew that people would question whether someone like her could really make it in a field like law. But she also knew that if she didn't try, she would never forgive herself. The night before her court appearance, Jasmine sat alone in her room, surrounded by law books, case files, and notes. Her mother had gone to work, and her grandmother had called to wish her luck. Jasmine's heart was pounding as she reviewed her case, her first real chance to prove herself. She knew she had the facts, the knowledge, and the drive. But there was something else that kept her up that night, a nagging fear that no matter how hard she tried, she might not be enough. She closed her eyes, remembering the words her grandmother always said, "Never let anyone make you feel like you don't belong." In that moment, Jasmine made a promise to herself. No matter what happened tomorrow in the courtroom, she would not back down. She would fight, because that was what she had been taught to do. And she would fight with everything she had, not just for herself, but for every person who had ever been told they didn't belong. Jasmine Williams wasn't just a student. She was a force. And the world was about to find out. The following morning, Jasmine stood outside the courthouse, the towering stone building looming in front of her like a fortress. Her palms were sweaty, but she couldn't let herself falter. Today was the day she would stand her ground, not just for herself, but for anyone who had ever been silenced, overlooked, or dismissed. She tightened her grip on her worn briefcase and walked toward the entrance, trying to steady her breath. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Jasmine's heart raced as she took a seat at the defendant's table, the cold wood feeling like an imposing barrier between her and the life she dreamed of. The tension in the air was palpable, and Jasmine couldn't help but feel like she was already on trial, judged before she had even spoken a word. Judge Palmer, seated at the bench with a look of indifference on his face, glanced at the clock. His gavel banged with an air of finality, signaling the start of the hearing. "Let's get this over with," he muttered, eyes scanning over his papers. His dismissive tone made Jasmine's stomach tighten, but she refused to let it shake her resolve. The prosecutor, a middle-aged man named Mr. Hargrave, adjusted his glasses and stood up, his voice smooth as he began outlining his case. "Your Honor, as we all know, Jasmine Williams was directly involved in a physical altercation at her high school. Witnesses saw her pushing and shoving students. Her actions created a disturbance that could have escalated into something far worse if not quickly contained. We request the maximum penalty in this case." Jasmine's grip tightened on the edge of the table. The word stung. But she wasn't about to let this man define who she was. She wasn't just some angry teenager looking for trouble, she had been trying to do the right thing. She had to make the judge see that. When it was her turn to speak, Jasmine stood up slowly, her legs unsteady, but her voice unwavering. She adjusted the collar of her blouse and cleared her throat, a calm confidence filling her as she began her defense. "Your Honor," she began, her voice carrying through the room, "I didn't start the fight. I was trying to stop it. I've always been the kind of person who steps in when I see someone in trouble. When I saw two students fighting in the hallway, I did what anyone would have done, I tried to break it up. I wasn't the aggressor, and I certainly didn't deserve to be punished for trying to do what's right." There was a slight shift in Judge Palmer's posture, but it wasn't enough to calm Jasmine's nerves. The skepticism in his eyes was unmistakable. The courtroom was silent, save for the occasional shuffle of papers or the scratch of a pen. She could feel the weight of everyone's doubt pressing down on her. But Jasmine wasn't done. She had come too far to let them dismiss her without a fight. "I've spent my life trying to make things right. I've studied law. I've spent countless hours reading case files and legal texts. I know the difference between right and wrong. And what I did that day was right," she continued, her voice growing more confident with each word. "I know the system doesn't always favor people like me. But I'm asking you to look at the facts, not the color of my skin, not the assumptions you might have about me because of where I come from or how I look. I'm asking you to listen to my side of the story." Jasmine could see Judge Palmer's lips tighten. He wasn't a fan of being challenged, especially not by someone as young as her. And yet, as she spoke, she felt a strange sense of empowerment wash over her. Her words had weight, and they weren't going to be easily ignored. "I have no record of violence," she added, her voice steady. "I've never been in trouble before. This was a one-time incident. I ask for your understanding, Your Honor." The courtroom remained still, but Jasmine could feel the tension between her and the judge building. For a moment, it seemed like the air itself had become thicker, charged with an undeniable sense of conflict. "Young lady," Judge Palmer said, his voice sharp, cutting through the silence. "You may think you know the law, but this is not the time for idealistic speeches. You are in a court of law, not a classroom debate. You are not here to lecture me." Jasmine's heart skipped a beat, but she refused to back down. She had expected this. She had heard enough about Judge Palmer's reputation to know that he didn't take kindly to being challenged, especially by someone like her. But she wasn't about to let him intimidate her. "I'm not lecturing you, Your Honor," Jasmine replied, her voice unwavering. "I'm telling you the truth. I'm telling you that I wasn't in the wrong. And I'm asking you to consider that before making any decisions." Judge Palmer sighed and leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers against his gavel. He looked at the prosecutor, then back at Jasmine, his eyes narrowing slightly. "This is a waste of time," he muttered. But Jasmine knew she had planted a seed of doubt in his mind. Even if he wouldn't show it openly, she could tell that he was listening now, at least to some degree. The prosecutor stood up again, his voice dripping with condescension. "Your Honor, I think we can all agree that the defendant's behavior speaks for itself. If she had been more responsible, we wouldn't be here today." Jasmine felt the anger flare up in her chest. It wasn't just the injustice of the situation, it was the fact that she had worked so hard, studied so much, and yet her efforts felt like they meant nothing in the eyes of people like Mr. Hargrave. In the eyes of people who assumed that just because she was a black teenager, she couldn't possibly be as smart, as capable, or as determined as anyone else in that room. But Jasmine knew that this was her moment. She was going to prove them all wrong, no matter what. "I didn't start this fight," Jasmine repeated, her voice cold and firm. "But I will finish it. I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm asking for justice." The words hung in the air as she looked directly at Judge Palmer, her eyes locked onto his with an intensity that left no room for doubt. She wasn't going to be overlooked anymore. She wasn't going to be ignored. Jasmine Williams wasn't just fighting for her freedom, she was fighting for her voice. And she was going to make sure that no one could take it away from her. Jasmine had never felt more alone than she did in that moment. Her heart was racing, and her thoughts were a blur as she sat back down at the defendant's table. The silence in the courtroom was deafening, with all eyes on her, and Judge Palmer's sharp, calculating gaze never leaving her. The tension was palpable, so thick you could almost touch it. Jasmine's words were still echoing in her mind, "I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm asking for justice." She wasn't going to let this case be dismissed like all the others she had seen, where the system ignored the voices of people like her. Jasmine had worked too hard, too long, to give up now. She could feel the weight of her mother's sacrifices on her shoulders and the wisdom of her grandmother's lessons ringing in her ears. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about proving that someone like her, someone who had never been given a fair chance, could stand up to the system and fight for her right to be heard. But even as she steeled herself, something unexpected happened. Judge Palmer sat forward, his eyes narrowing as if weighing something in his mind. He didn't speak immediately. Instead, he tapped his fingers rhythmically on the side of his gavel, the sound slicing through the thick silence. Jasmine swallowed hard, unsure of what to expect next. It felt like she was teetering on the edge of something, a precipice where the truth could either set her free or send her plummeting. "I don't know what to make of you, Ms. Williams," Judge Palmer finally said, his voice low but firm. "You seem far too confident for someone in your position." Jasmine blinked, surprised by the shift in his tone. It wasn't the scornful dismissal she had expected, nor was it the indifference she had seen from him earlier. It was something else, a flicker of curiosity, maybe even respect, though she wasn't sure if she dared to hope for that. She gathered her courage and leaned forward, her posture straightening as she replied, "I'm not trying to be confident, Your Honor. I'm just telling the truth. And if the truth isn't enough, then maybe this system is broken in ways that go deeper than what I'm standing here for today." Her words seemed to hang in the air longer than she had intended, but instead of the sharp rebuttal she feared, Judge Palmer merely nodded as if he were processing what she had said. A long pause stretched between them. In that moment, Jasmine had the strangest feeling that he wasn't just listening to her words, he was hearing her. And in the courtroom, that was a rare thing indeed. "I'll reserve judgment for now," he said finally, his voice shifting into a more neutral tone. "We'll reconvene in 1 week. I suggest you spend this time reflecting on what you've said here today." Jasmine could hardly believe what she was hearing. He wasn't rejecting her outright. He was listening. She had made an impact. Despite all the odds stacked against her, she had gotten through to him. But she didn't have time to dwell on that. As the gavel came down with an echoing bang, signaling the end of the session, the courtroom slowly began to empty out, but the fight was far from over. Jasmine still had a long way to go. 1 week later, Jasmine found herself back in the courtroom, the familiar weight of her briefcase in her hand. The tension was even thicker than before. She had prepared herself for this moment, rehearsing her arguments, digging deeper into legal precedents, and even seeking guidance from mentors who had helped her sharpen her skills. She was ready. She had to be. As she walked into the courtroom, she noticed something strange. Judge Palmer wasn't sitting in his usual position at the bench. Instead, a different judge, a woman with a sharp, yet compassionate gaze, was presiding over the case. Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. "Your Honor," she asked, her voice a little unsure. The new judge looked up from her papers and smiled. "I'm Judge Riley. Judge Palmer has recused himself from this case. He'll no longer be overseeing it." Jasmine's mind raced. What did that mean? Was it a sign that Judge Palmer had been swayed by her arguments? Or was something else at play? "I understand you've made an unusual impression, Ms. Williams," Judge Riley said, her voice calm and measured. "So let's see if you can impress me as well." Jasmine didn't know what was happening, but she wasn't about to back down now. She had come too far to let doubt and uncertainty cloud her vision. The silence in the courtroom was suffocating. Jasmine's heart pounded in her chest as she took her first step toward the center of the room. All eyes were on her, Judge Riley's, the prosecutors, even the few spectators in the gallery. She had never felt more exposed. But something inside her had shifted. This was no longer just about defending herself, it was about telling the world her truth, her story, and making them see her for who she really was. She took a deep breath and looked directly at Judge Riley. The weight of the moment settled over her, but it also gave her clarity. This wasn't just a trial of her actions, it was a trial of her character, of everything she had fought for. "Your Honor," Jasmine began, her voice steady but laden with emotion, "I'm standing here today because, for so long, people like me, black girls like me, have been told we don't belong, that we don't deserve to be heard. I know what it's like to be dismissed, to be judged before anyone even listens to you. I've lived that reality every single day of my life." There was a subtle gasp in the room as Jasmine spoke. It wasn't an outburst, just a recognition that this wasn't the defense they had been expecting. She was laying bare her raw truth, not just about the case, but about the world outside the courtroom. "I've always tried to do the right thing," she continued, the words flowing more freely now, as if they had been trapped inside her for too long. "But sometimes, doing the right thing isn't easy. Sometimes, doing the right thing means standing up when no one else will, even when you know it could cost you everything." She paused for a moment, feeling the weight of her words sink in. Jasmine could feel the judgmental stares, the skepticism still lingering in the room, but she refused to let it stop her. She had come too far. "The day of the incident, I wasn't trying to start a fight. I was trying to stop it. I was trying to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. I've spent my life learning about justice, reading legal texts, studying what's right and what's wrong. I know the difference. And that day, I made the choice to step in, even when others were just watching. I thought it was the right thing to do." Jasmine took a deep breath, fighting the lump in her throat as she continued. "I know people may look at me and see a teenager, a kid who doesn't know enough, who hasn't lived enough. But that's just it, I have lived. I've been through things that some people can't even imagine, and yet I've made it here. I'm not just some angry kid looking for trouble. I'm someone who's been shaped by the world, and I've learned to fight not just for myself, but for others, too." The courtroom was still, hanging on her every word. Jasmine felt a shift in the atmosphere. There was something undeniable about her story, something that reached beyond the confines of the law and touched on the humanity that existed in everyone. "I didn't act out of anger," Jasmine added, her voice quieter now, but filled with the same resolve. "I acted out of a desire to do good. And if that's what makes me guilty, then maybe we need to rethink what it means to be guilty at all." The words hung in the air like a heavy weight, and for a moment, no one spoke. Even Mr. Hargrave, who had been so sure of his position, seemed taken aback. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, as if realizing that Jasmine wasn't just a defendant in front of him, she was a person with a voice that demanded to be heard. Judge Riley's eyes remained fixed on Jasmine, her expression unreadable. But there was something in her gaze, something more than just neutrality. Jasmine couldn't tell whether it was admiration, understanding, or simply the weight of a judge trying to make sense of everything she had just heard. "I'm not asking for pity, Your Honor," Jasmine continued, her voice firm now, "I'm asking for fairness. For the chance to prove that I'm more than what people might think I am. I'm asking you to see me as an individual, to see me as someone capable of doing the right thing, even in a system that hasn't always been kind to people like me." There was a long pause. Jasmine could feel her pulse pounding in her ears as she awaited the judge's response. The words she had just spoken felt like the culmination of everything she had fought for, her dreams, her future, and her right to be treated with dignity and respect. Finally, Judge Riley spoke. "I can't pretend to understand everything you've been through, Ms. Williams," she said, her voice soft, but the weight of her words carried. "But I will say this, you've made a compelling argument today. You've shown me something that goes beyond the details of this case. You've shown me that you understand what it means to fight for what's right, and that takes courage." Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. Could it be? Was she really listening? The judge leaned back in her chair, her eyes still fixed on Jasmine. "That being said," she continued, her tone serious, "I'm not going to make any decisions hastily. This is not just about you. This is about a community, a system, and the values we hold dear. I'm going to take everything you've said into account before issuing a ruling." Jasmine's chest tightened with both relief and fear. She had done it. She had made her case. But now, the waiting game began. She had fought for her voice, and now, all she could do was wait to see if the system would give her the chance to rise above the labels that had been placed on her. As the court session adjourned, Jasmine walked back to her seat, her legs trembling slightly. The battle wasn't over yet, but for the first time, she felt like she had taken a real step forward, not just in this case, but in her life. She wasn't just the girl who had been dismissed. She was Jasmine Williams, the girl who had something to say. And she would make sure the world heard it. The days that followed the courtroom session felt like a blur to Jasmine. The weight of the trial and her impassioned speech continued to echo in her mind, but now, a new uncertainty had settled in her chest. She had poured everything into her defense, but the final verdict was still hanging over her like a dark cloud. Every time she closed her eyes, she replayed the moment when Judge Riley had nodded thoughtfully, but hadn't given her a clear answer. She couldn't help but wonder if it had all been for nothing. Had the truth she spoke been enough? Or had she merely given them another reason to doubt her, to dismiss her as the angry teenager she feared they saw her as? Still, Jasmine knew she couldn't let that doubt paralyze her. She had come this far, there was no turning back now. It was the following Friday when Jasmine received the call. She was sitting in her favorite spot by the window at home, looking out at the street as the sun dipped below the horizon. Her mom, busy in the kitchen preparing dinner, barely noticed the phone ringing until Jasmine picked it up. "Hello." Jasmine's voice was quiet, cautious, as if she expected this call to be just another one of those empty assurances. The ones where they tell you they'll get back to you but you know deep down that they won't. "Ms. Williams," a deep voice said on the other end of the line. It was Judge Riley. Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. "I've reviewed your case, and I've made my decision. I'd like to meet with you in my chambers tomorrow to discuss it further." Jasmine's hand tightened around the phone. Her breath caught in her throat, but she forced herself to respond. "Yes, Your Honor. I'll be there." The line went dead, and Jasmine was left alone with the weight of her emotions crashing down on her. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for, but also dreading. The moment that could change everything. The next day, Jasmine arrived at the courthouse early, a knot of nerves in her stomach. Her mother had insisted on coming with her, but Jasmine had insisted that she needed to face this on her own. Her mother's faith in her was unwavering, but Jasmine didn't want her to have to see her fail if things went wrong. As she walked through the quiet corridors of the courthouse, her mind raced with thoughts of what could happen. Could Judge Riley see the merit of her arguments? Would she stand by her, or would Jasmine be sent back to face the harsh consequences of a system that had always been stacked against her? When she entered Judge Riley's chambers, she was surprised to see the judge sitting behind her desk, her posture relaxed, a stark contrast to the stern demeanor she had worn in court. There was no hint of the cold detachment Jasmine had come to expect from the legal system. Instead, Judge Riley looked at her with an almost warm expression. "Ms. Williams," she said, gesturing for Jasmine to sit across from her. "I've spent a lot of time thinking about your case. You've made a strong argument, and while I understand that you were acting out of what you believe to be right, there are still rules and consequences that must be considered." Jasmine's heart sank, but she forced herself to listen. "The question is not whether you acted inappropriately, but rather the impact your actions have had on your community and whether or not you've learned from them, Judge Riley continued. And I believe you have. You've shown maturity and understanding in a way that's rare for someone your age. You've earned my respect. Jasmine blinked, the words hitting her harder than she had expected. For the first time, someone in power was speaking to her as if she mattered. Not just as a defendant, but as a person with agency, someone who could make a difference. I've decided, Judge Riley said slowly, that the charges will be reduced. You'll be required to complete community service and participate in a mentorship program for young people who are at risk of being caught in situations like yours. I think it's important for you to not just be punished, but to have an opportunity to use your voice and your experiences to help others. Jasmine felt the weight on her shoulders lift. The words were still sinking in as she let out a long breath. She had done it. She had won. She had proven herself worthy of the chance to move forward, to grow, and to learn from her past mistakes. Thank you, Your Honor, Jasmine said, her voice barely above a whisper. She wasn't sure if she was thanking Judge Riley for the decision or for the chance to be seen. Judge Riley nodded, a small smile on her lips. You're welcome, Ms. Williams. Now, go and make a difference. Her first day of community service was at a local youth center, a small building tucked in the middle of a rundown neighborhood. It wasn't a glamorous place, far from it. The walls were cracked, the paint chipped, and the floor creaked beneath her feet. But inside, there was a spark of something real. The kids who came here had seen their fair share of struggles, but they were full of life and potential, just like Jasmine. Walking into the center, she was greeted by Ms. Adams, the woman in charge. She had a no-nonsense attitude but a heart of gold. She shook Jasmine's hand firmly and gave her a welcoming smile. I'm glad to have you here, Jasmine. These kids need someone they can relate to, someone who's been through the struggles they're facing. Jasmine nodded, taking a deep breath. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she knew she had a lot to offer. I'm ready to help, she said, feeling the weight of her words. This wasn't just about fulfilling a requirement, it was about redemption. It was about giving back. Ms. Adams led Jasmine to the main room where a group of teenagers sat around a table, laughing and talking, their conversations a mix of sarcasm, humor, and the occasional frustration that came with growing up. As Jasmine walked in, the chatter died down. All eyes turned to her, sizing her up. This is Jasmine, Ms. Adams said, introducing her to the group. She's here to help out, so give her a chance. A few of the kids exchanged skeptical looks, but Jasmine wasn't intimidated. She had faced far worse than teenage judgment. She took a seat at the table and looked around, trying to find a way to connect. So, what's the deal with you? One of the girls, Maya, asked, her tone both curious and challenging. Why are you here? You don't look like you're from around here. Jasmine smiled, a little unsure of how to answer at first, but then decided to be honest. I'm here because I made some mistakes, but I'm trying to make things right. I was in trouble before, but I'm working hard to fix it. And I think, she paused, I think I can help some of you avoid making the same mistakes I did. Maya raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. So, what? You're some kind of motivational speaker now? Jasmine chuckled softly, shaking her head. Not exactly. I just think we all need a second chance. And sometimes, helping others is the best way to help yourself. The room fell silent for a moment, and Jasmine could feel the weight of their skepticism. But she didn't back down. She knew what it was like to feel like no one believed in you, to feel like you were constantly being judged. But that had to change, not just for her, but for everyone in this room. Over the next few weeks, Jasmine found herself coming back to the youth center every day. It wasn't easy. The kids didn't immediately warm to her, and the work was far more challenging than she had imagined. But with every passing day, she saw small changes. Maya, the girl who had been the most skeptical, started opening up to her. They had long conversations about their shared experiences, growing up in tough neighborhoods, dealing with the pressure of expectations, and the constant battle to rise above it all. Maya wasn't the only one Jasmine reached out to. There was also Tyrell, a quiet boy who rarely spoke, but whose eyes held a world of untold stories. Jasmine made it her mission to connect with him, to show him that there was a future beyond the confines of their circumstances. Slowly, she earned his trust. She didn't push him, just let him talk when he was ready. And when he did, Jasmine listened like she had never listened before. In his words, she heard her own struggles, her own fears. And that connection, she realized, was more important than anything else. One evening, after a particularly tough day at the center, Jasmine sat down with Ms. Adams to talk about how things were going. She had been working hard, but sometimes it felt like she wasn't getting anywhere. "You know, you're doing great," Ms. Adams said, her voice warm but firm. "I've been watching you, Jasmine. I can see the difference you're making. It's not going to be an overnight change, but you're planting seeds. Trust me, those kids will remember you. They'll carry what you've taught them, even if they don't show it right now." Jasmine nodded, grateful for the encouragement. "It's hard," she admitted. "Sometimes I feel like I'm not getting through to them. Like they don't care." "They care more than you think," Ms. Adams replied. "And you care more than you realize. That's what counts. It's not about fixing everything at once. It's about showing up, being there when it counts, and giving them a reason to believe they can be more than what the world expects of them." Jasmine thought about her own journey, the hardships she had faced, the people who had believed in her when she didn't believe in herself. She had always wanted to make a difference, and now, she was doing just that. It wasn't about some grand gesture or big victory. It was about the small, everyday acts of kindness, the ways she had shown up for these kids in ways no one had shown up for her. That was what mattered. It had been a few months since Jasmine had completed her community service, but she hadn't been able to shake the feeling that her work was far from over. The lessons she'd learned at the youth center, the relationships she had built with Maya, Tyrell, and the others, had transformed her in ways she hadn't anticipated. There was a fire in her now, a desire to keep making a difference. But that wasn't the only reason she found herself at a crossroads. Jasmine had always been a fighter, but the thought of leaving the youth center to focus entirely on her personal goals seemed wrong. The kids, especially the ones she had helped, had become a part of her. They weren't just faces she saw every day, they were a part of her journey. And the more she thought about it, the more she realized that maybe, just maybe, she could take the lessons she'd learned and build something bigger. It was early one Saturday morning when Jasmine sat in the park, staring out at the playground where kids were laughing and playing. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her from her thoughts. It was an email from Ms. Adams, the mentor she'd come to respect and admire. Her words seemed to confirm what Jasmine had already been thinking. "Jasmine, I have an idea. There's an opportunity to apply for a youth mentorship program that could change everything for you and the kids you've worked with. I think it's time you take the next step. Let's meet today to talk more about it. Ms. Adams." Jasmine's heart raced. She didn't even have to think twice. She typed a quick response, "I'm in. I'll be there at noon." At noon, Jasmine arrived at the youth center, where Ms. Adams was already waiting for her in the small office, a smile on her face. There was an excitement in the air, a sense of something big about to happen. "I'm glad you could make it," Ms. Adams said, standing to greet Jasmine. "Take a seat." Jasmine did as she was told, her mind racing. What was this opportunity? Was it the next step in her journey? Ms. Adams leaned forward, her eyes full of purpose. "I've been talking with some people about you, Jasmine. I think it's time you become more than just a volunteer here. You've shown leadership, you've helped the kids make real progress, and you're ready for more. There's a mentorship program starting up, and they're looking for someone to run it, someone who understands the struggles these kids face, someone who can connect with them on a deeper level. Jasmine blinked, surprised. Wait, you want me to lead the program? Ms. Adams nodded. Yes, I do. And so do the people I've spoken to. They believe you can make a difference, not just here, but on a larger scale. It's an opportunity to help shape the future of this community, to create a safe space for young people who need guidance. And I know you're capable of it. Jasmine was speechless for a moment. This was everything she had wanted, but it felt surreal. She had only just started to find herself again, and now she was being asked to step into a leadership role that could change everything. But there was one thing she knew for sure, she couldn't back down. Not now. Thank you, Ms. Adams, she finally said, her voice full of emotion. I'm honored, and I won't let you down. I'm ready for this. Ms. Adams smiled, her eyes gleaming with pride. I knew you were ready, Jasmine. I've seen the way you've grown, the way you've inspired the kids. This is your chance to take it further. To make a real impact. Just remember, this isn't about being perfect. It's about being real, being there when they need you, and showing them that they're not alone. Jasmine nodded. I won't forget that. I promise. As Jasmine left the meeting that day, her mind was racing with possibilities. She had always known that she wanted to help others, but now, she was being handed the keys to a bigger platform. She wasn't just going to work with kids at a local center anymore, she was going to help shape the future of the entire community. And that was something she wasn't going to take lightly. That evening, she sat down with her mom at the kitchen table, her heart still buzzing from the news. Her mother, as always, was the first person she wanted to share this with. Mom, I've got some news, Jasmine began, her voice full of excitement. I've been offered a position to run a mentorship program for young people. It's a big opportunity. Her mom's face lit up, pride evident in her eyes. That's amazing, baby. I knew you could do it. You've worked so hard, and now it's paying off. Jasmine smiled, but there was a part of her that still felt overwhelmed. I'm excited, Mom, but I'm also scared. What if I'm not good enough? What if I fail? Her mom reached across the table and took her hand, her grip firm and reassuring. You've always been good enough, Jasmine. Don't let fear stop you from doing what you're meant to do. You've got the heart and the strength to make this work. I believe in you. Jasmine felt a wave of comfort wash over her. Her mom had always believed in her, even when Jasmine had doubted herself. And now, it was her turn to believe in herself, to take the leap and create something lasting. The next few weeks were a whirlwind as Jasmine began preparing for her new role. She worked with Ms. Adams and the other mentors to design the program, plan activities, and figure out how to reach the kids in the most meaningful way. She learned quickly that leadership wasn't just about giving instructions, it was about listening, connecting, and guiding others to find their own path. Jasmine also took on the responsibility of mentoring her first group of young people. Some of them were like her, angry, disillusioned, and searching for something they could believe in. Others were shy, afraid to speak up or share their thoughts. But Jasmine knew how to reach them. She had been there once. She knew what it was like to feel like the world was against you, to feel misunderstood and alone. And so, she listened. She sat with the kids, hearing their stories, understanding their pain, and slowly, piece by piece, building trust. It wasn't always easy, and there were setbacks. Some days, it felt like nothing was making a difference. But then, on days like today, when one of the kids opened up about their struggles, Jasmine saw it all come together. One of the boys, Elijah, had been particularly hard to reach. He was distant, often combative, and seemed to shut down whenever anyone tried to help him. But that day, he sat across from her, his eyes filled with uncertainty. I don't know if I can do this, Elijah admitted, his voice low. Jasmine leaned in, her voice gentle but firm. I know you can. You just have to believe in yourself, Elijah. No one's perfect, but that doesn't mean you don't have the power to change your path. He nodded slowly, and for the first time, Jasmine saw a flicker of hope in his eyes. That was all it took. The tiniest spark. And in that moment, Jasmine realized something: this was her purpose. Helping others find their way, just like she had found hers. The road ahead would still be tough, but Jasmine was ready. She was no longer just a girl trying to survive. She was a mentor, a leader, and a force for change. And nothing could stop her now. The journey was just beginning. As the mentorship program continued to grow, so did Jasmine's responsibilities. She found herself juggling more than she ever had before, meeting with kids, organizing activities, and figuring out how to balance her personal life with her work at the center. But despite the challenges, Jasmine felt more alive than ever. Every breakthrough, no matter how small, made the exhaustion worth it. Each time one of the kids came to her with a question or a problem, she saw a future that was different from her own past, a future filled with possibility. One rainy afternoon, however, things took an unexpected turn. Jasmine had just finished a meeting with a group of teens, discussing their future goals when she received a call from Ms. Adams. Her voice was tense, which immediately set Jasmine on edge. "Jasmine, we have a problem," Ms. Adams said, not wasting any time. "I just got off the phone with the funding organization for the mentorship program. They're pulling their support. There's a restructuring going on, and they've decided to prioritize other projects." Jasmine's heart dropped. What does that mean for the program? For the kids? Ms. Adams sighed. It means we might lose everything we've worked for. The funding is what keeps this place running. Without it, we can't afford to pay the staff or continue any of the activities we've been offering. We might have to shut down. Jasmine stared out the window, the rain pouring down in heavy sheets, mirroring the turmoil she felt inside. The program had become more than just a job for her, it was her life. It was a place where she had seen kids like her, kids who had given up hope, find something to believe in. To lose it all now seemed impossible. "I can't let that happen," Jasmine said, her voice steady but filled with determination. "We've worked too hard. We can't give up. There has to be another way." Ms. Adams's voice softened. "I wish there was more I could do. But without the funding, it's going to be really difficult. I know how much this means to you, Jasmine. Just don't give up too soon. Let's think this through." Jasmine hung up the phone and sat down at the nearest table, her mind racing. The idea of giving up on the program was unthinkable. She had seen the difference it made, not only in the kids but in herself. It was more than just a mentorship program, it was a lifeline for so many. She leaned back in her chair, trying to clear her mind. There had to be a way to save it. But how? The answer didn't come immediately. Instead, she spent the next few hours brainstorming, trying to think of ways to secure the funding they so desperately needed. Grants? Donations? A fundraising campaign? Then it hit her. She had the perfect opportunity to turn this around, but she had to get creative. The kids, the very people who had benefited from the program, could be part of the solution. What if they put on a fundraiser? What if they showcased the work they had done, the progress they had made, and the impact the program had on their lives? It was risky, but it was the kind of bold move she had learned to make. Jasmine called Ms. Adams again. "I have an idea," she said, barely able to contain her excitement. "What if we organize a community event? We could invite local businesses, families, and everyone we've worked with. We could have the kids perform, show their art, share their stories. I know it's a big ask, but we can get local sponsors involved and raise the funds we need." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and Jasmine could almost hear Ms. Adams considering the idea. "That might actually work," Ms. Adams said, her voice filled with cautious optimism. "It's a long shot, but it could be just what we need to show the community, and the funding organizations, how much we're doing here. Let's do it. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity as Jasmine began planning the community event. She enlisted the help of her mentors, the other staff members, and, of course, the kids. They would need to perform, create art, and prepare stories to tell about their experiences in the program. It would be a way to demonstrate the impact the program had on their lives, to show the world that it was worth saving. Jasmine worked tirelessly, coordinating everything from the venue to the food, the schedule to the decorations. It was exhausting, but she was driven by one thought: the kids couldn't lose this. They had worked too hard, and she had worked too hard to let it all slip away now. But as the day of the event grew nearer, doubt crept in. There were moments when Jasmine wasn't sure if it was enough. Would the community even show up? Would anyone care? Would the local businesses step up as sponsors, or would they turn their backs on the program? The night before the event, Jasmine stood in the community center's parking lot, looking up at the sky as the first stars began to appear. She was tired, worn down from the weeks of preparation. But as she stood there, she realized something: this wasn't just about the money. It wasn't even about the event. It was about the kids, about showing them that they had value, that they mattered. She wasn't just fighting for the program. She was fighting for them. The day of the event arrived, and Jasmine's nerves were in full force. The community center was buzzing with activity as people set up booths, arranged tables, and decorated the space. The kids were backstage, getting ready for their performances. Some were nervous, others excited, but all were eager to show what they had worked on. As the doors opened, people began streaming in. Local businesses had set up booths, offering products, food, and services. Families and community members wandered through, checking out the displays of art and reading the stories the kids had written. Jasmine couldn't help but feel a sense of pride as she watched the kids interact with the crowd, their confidence growing with every compliment and bit of encouragement they received. Then came the performances. One by one, the kids took the stage to share their talents: music, poetry, dance, and spoken word. Each performance was a testament to their growth, their journey from uncertainty to self-assurance. Jasmine could see the transformation in their eyes, the same transformation she had experienced herself. They were no longer the kids who had nothing to say; now, they had a voice, and they were using it. When the last performance ended, the crowd erupted into applause. Jasmine, standing backstage, felt a lump in her throat. She had done it. They had done it. The event had been a success beyond her wildest expectations. Later that evening, as the final guests trickled out, Jasmine stood with Ms. Adams, looking around at the emptying community center. She felt a sense of relief wash over her. The fundraiser had raised more than enough money to keep the program running. But even more than that, it had shown the world, and the kids, that they mattered. "You did it, Jasmine," Ms. Adams said, her voice filled with pride. "I knew you had it in you. This is just the beginning." Jasmine smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. "We did it. It wasn't just me. It was all of us." Ms. Adams chuckled. "True, but you were the one who made it happen. Now, you've shown everyone what's possible when we come together." As Jasmine walked out of the community center that night, she felt like she had just crossed the finish line of a race she hadn't known she was running. She had faced doubts, obstacles, and setbacks. But she had overcome them, just as she had always known she would. And in that moment, Jasmine realized that this was only the beginning. The road ahead was still long, but she was ready for whatever came next. For the first time in a long time, Jasmine truly believed that she could change the world. And she was going to start, one kid at a time. Jasmine's triumph over saving the mentorship program was still fresh in her mind when a new challenge emerged, one that she wasn't prepared for. She had been on top of the world, watching the kids' progress and feeling more confident than ever. But nothing in her journey could have prepared her for what was about to happen. It started innocuously enough, an invitation to a fundraising meeting. Jasmine had been invited by a local community leader, Mr. Carson, who had expressed interest in further supporting the program. He was well known around town for his involvement with local youth initiatives, and Jasmine had always thought of him as an ally. His presence had been a huge part of the success of the recent fundraiser. His contributions had given the program the financial stability it needed to move forward. But Jasmine's gut told her that something didn't feel right as she entered the meeting room. The moment she walked in, she could feel a coldness in the air. Mr. Carson and a few others, including a few new faces, were sitting around a large table. They all seemed unusually stiff, and no one smiled when she walked in. "Jasmine, thank you for coming," Mr. Carson said, his tone polite but distant. "Please, take a seat." Jasmine sat down, trying to shake the odd feeling in her chest. She thought about the last few months, the work, the progress, the kids, and everything she had fought for. She wasn't going to let anything take it away. The meeting started off with typical pleasantries. They discussed some potential upcoming events and how the mentorship program could grow with additional support. But Jasmine quickly realized that the meeting was becoming less about the kids and more about numbers. Profit margins. Donations. "I know the mentorship program is doing well," Mr. Carson said, glancing at the papers in front of him. "But we need to discuss the future. In order for us to keep supporting this, we need to make sure it's sustainable." Jasmine was confused. "What do you mean by that?" "The kids are doing great. They're learning, they're growing, and the community's support is strong. We've proven it with the fundraiser." "I thought you were behind us." Mr. Carson's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "I am, but there are other factors at play here, Jasmine. We have to consider the long-term financial viability of this program. The kids need more than just a place to meet after school. They need jobs, they need educational resources, things that cost money. Real money." Jasmine nodded slowly, trying to keep her emotions in check. "I understand that. But we've been doing this with limited resources, and look at the difference it's made. This isn't about just money, it's about what we're giving back to the community." Mr. Carson's expression hardened slightly. "You're not seeing the bigger picture, Jasmine. We can't keep throwing money at a program that's not making a tangible return. There's a financial aspect to everything, and if we're going to keep funding your program, we need to see results. And I'm not talking about feelings or success stories, I'm talking about cold, hard numbers." Jasmine's heart sank. She had fought so hard to make this program about the kids, about building them up, giving them a sense of hope and belonging. And now, here was a person who was reducing everything she had worked for into just numbers. "I can't believe this," Jasmine muttered under her breath, staring at the table. "I thought you believed in the kids, in what we're doing here." There was an uncomfortable silence in the room, and Jasmine could feel the weight of every set of eyes on her. She looked around, searching for support, but all she saw were indifferent faces. Faces that didn't understand the passion she had for the program, the community, or the kids. Mr. Carson cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "Jasmine, we're doing this for the greater good. You need to understand that. This is about sustainability, about keeping things going in the long term. You'll have to make some tough decisions if you want this to continue." Jasmine's mind raced. What was he asking her to do? Would she have to compromise everything she believed in for the sake of money? Could she really throw the kids under the bus just to make things easier? She stood up abruptly, unable to stay seated any longer. "I'm sorry, but I can't do that. I can't just turn this into a business. These kids, they're not investments. They're people." Her voice cracked as she spoke the words, and for the first time, she felt like she was losing control. Mr. Carson didn't look surprised. He just leaned back in his chair and nodded. "I understand your perspective, Jasmine. But sometimes, that's the reality we all face. You have to decide what's more important to you, your principles or your program. Jasmine could feel her anger rising. She had always been told that doing the right thing would be worth it in the end. She had fought for this program because she believed in the kids, in their potential. But now it seemed like she was fighting for something that didn't matter to the people who held the power. "I guess I'll have to make that decision, then," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She turned to leave, her steps heavy, but before she could make it to the door, Mr. Carson's voice stopped her. "Think about what's at stake, Jasmine. The program could be bigger, more effective, with the right kind of backing. But we need to be realistic about what we're dealing with. You'll come around." Jasmine didn't respond. She couldn't. Instead, she walked out of the room and into the cold night, the rain still coming down in a steady rhythm. The weight of the conversation lingered with her, thick and suffocating. Back at the community center, Jasmine tried to shake off the conversation, but it gnawed at her. She couldn't stop thinking about the pressure Mr. Carson had put on her. He had made it clear that she would have to choose, either give up her principles and accept his version of the program, or risk losing everything. The next few days were filled with doubt and internal conflict. Jasmine questioned everything. Was it possible to balance financial stability with staying true to the program's core values? Should she compromise, just a little, to keep the program going? Or should she stand firm and risk losing the support she so desperately needed? She reached out to Maya, her closest friend, hoping to find some clarity. "I don't know what to do, Maya," Jasmine admitted over the phone. "Mr. Carson says we need to make changes, big ones, and I just don't know if I can go along with it. I feel like I'm being asked to sell out, to turn my back on the kids for the sake of numbers." Maya was quiet for a moment, and then her voice was firm. "Jasmine, you know what's right. You didn't start this program to make money. You started it to help people, to make a difference. If you compromise now, you're not only betraying the kids, you're betraying yourself." Jasmine let out a shaky breath. Maya's words hit hard. She knew Maya was right. She had come so far, fought so hard, to get to this point. And she couldn't let a few people with power dictate the future of something so important. "I'm not going to let it go down like that," Jasmine said, a new resolve in her voice. "I'll find another way. I'll fight for them, for the kids. I won't let them down." Maya chuckled softly. "I knew you'd come to that conclusion. You're stronger than you think, Jasmine. You've already done the impossible." The decision was made. Jasmine wasn't going to back down. But the road ahead was uncertain, and she knew it would be one of the hardest battles of her life. She would have to fight against the very people who had supported the program, people who had the power to end it all. But Jasmine wasn't afraid anymore. She had already faced the hardest challenges of her life. And if it meant standing up for what was right, she was ready to do whatever it took. The fight was just beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Jasmine spent the following days reflecting on her decision and figuring out her next steps. She had been in the mentorship program long enough to know that fighting for what she believed in was never going to be easy, but now, more than ever, she was ready to take the fight to the people who had the power to change the future of the program. Her mind was already spinning with ideas on how to rally support, how to bring the community together and show the powers that be what they would lose if the program was abandoned. She wasn't going to let anyone reduce the kids' future to a mere line in a budget. The first thing she did was call a meeting with the other mentors and staff members. They needed to know what was going on and why she was so determined to fight. As the team gathered in the community center, Jasmine stood before them, trying to mask the worry in her voice with the same energy and determination that had kept her going up until this point. "We've just been hit with some serious news," she began, pacing back and forth in front of them. "The program might be in jeopardy. The funding isn't guaranteed, and the people who hold the purse strings are asking us to compromise. They want to turn our kids into something they're not. We can't let that happen." There was a moment of silence as the group absorbed the news. Then, one by one, the mentors started speaking up. "I can't believe it," said Marcus, one of the senior mentors, his fists clenched in frustration. "We've done everything right. The kids are doing great. And now they want us to turn them into some kind of corporate project?" "I'm with you, Jasmine," said Ava, a mentor who worked directly with the youngest kids. "This program has meant so much to the kids. We've given them something to hold on to. If we lose it, they lose everything." Jasmine nodded, feeling the strength of their support. This wasn't just her fight anymore. It was their fight. It was the fight of everyone who had seen the program's value firsthand. "We're not going to let that happen," Jasmine said, feeling her resolve firming with each passing second. "We have to go beyond just meeting with the people who make decisions. We need the community. We need to show them how important this program is." The first step was to gather the kids themselves. Jasmine knew that the kids were the heart of the program, and if anyone could help sway public opinion, it was them. She asked each mentor to speak to their group of kids and encourage them to share their stories of how the program had impacted their lives, how it had given them hope, purpose, and direction when they had none. Over the next few days, Jasmine worked with the kids to help them prepare their testimonials. Some of them were shy at first, hesitant to speak publicly about their struggles and their progress. But with each rehearsal, they grew more confident. Jasmine reminded them that their voices mattered, that their stories could change everything. Meanwhile, she was making calls, reaching out to local businesses, community leaders, and anyone who had supported the program in the past. She knew that if they could mobilize enough people, they could make an impact, no matter how big the opposition. She was determined to make it impossible for those in power to ignore the outpouring of support. But as she was working late one night, going through lists of potential donors and community partners, her phone rang. It was Ms. Adams. "I think you need to see this," Ms. Adams said, her voice tinged with concern. "I just got a tip from someone inside the organization that Mr. Carson is moving ahead with plans to shut down the program." Jasmine felt her blood run cold. She knew the stakes were high, but hearing those words made the situation feel all too real. "What do you mean, shut it down?" Ms. Adams sighed. "They're already planning on reallocating the funds. They're moving ahead with another program that will, well, I don't know the specifics yet, but it sounds like they're not even considering our program. They've already found a replacement. A bigger initiative with corporate sponsors. It's a done deal." Jasmine felt a sharp pang of panic in her chest. She had known that Mr. Carson was pushing for changes, but this felt like betrayal. The program wasn't just a line item to be cut from a budget. It was a living, breathing entity that had made a difference to so many kids. But it seemed like those in charge no longer saw it that way. "We can't let them do this," Jasmine said firmly, the fire in her belly rising. "We can't just sit back and let it happen." "I know," Ms. Adams replied. "But we need to act fast. They've already started reaching out to other community leaders to get their support. We're fighting an uphill battle here." Jasmine didn't flinch. She had faced challenges before, but this one felt personal. The stakes had never been higher. "We'll fight back," she said, her voice unwavering. "We'll make sure the community knows what's at stake." The very next day, Jasmine called an emergency meeting with all the staff and mentors. She needed to rally the troops. They had to move quickly, but they had to be strategic. This wasn't just about anger, it was about action. "We're running out of time," Jasmine said, addressing everyone in the room. "We've been told that Mr. Carson and his team are already preparing to shut the program down. But we're not going down without a fight. We need to gather our supporters, local businesses, the families we've helped, the kids. We need to make noise. The plan was simple but ambitious. Jasmine and the team would organize a town hall meeting, inviting the entire community to come and hear directly from the kids. They would present the testimonials they had worked on, give real, emotional evidence of the program's impact, and urge the community to stand up and support the program. They would also put together a petition and encourage everyone who believed in the program to sign it. The idea was to show the funding organization Mr. Carson that they weren't just a small, overlooked initiative, they were a force to be reckoned with. But Jasmine knew that this wasn't going to be enough. She had to think bigger. The community had to see how the program was tied to something deeper than money. It was about the future of the kids, the safety of their neighborhoods, and the promise of a better tomorrow. The day of the town hall arrived, and Jasmine could feel the weight of everything bearing down on her. As she stepped onto the stage, she looked out at the sea of faces, community members, local business owners, parents, teachers, and of course, the kids. The support was overwhelming, and for the first time in days, Jasmine allowed herself to breathe. She had something that Mr. Carson and his team didn't have: heart. They had the resources, the backing, and the cold, calculated approach to decision-making. But Jasmine had the people. She had the kids. And in that moment, she realized that maybe that was all they needed. She stepped up to the microphone, cleared her throat, and looked out at the crowd. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice steady. "What you see in front of you isn't just a program. These kids are not just statistics, they're the future of this community. And we're here today to make sure that future stays bright." The room fell silent, and Jasmine could see the crowd leaning in, eager to hear what came next. And so, the battle began. Jasmine stood at the podium, the weight of her words settling over the room like a heavy cloak. As she gazed out at the sea of faces, she knew that the future of the mentorship program was hanging in the balance. The kids who had once walked into this room as shy, uncertain individuals now stood beside her, ready to share their stories. This was their moment, their chance to show the world what the program had done for them. "Every one of these kids," Jasmine continued, her voice growing stronger with each word, "has a story to tell. A story about how this program has helped them find their path, given them a sense of purpose, and, most importantly, a place where they matter. We cannot let that go." She turned to the first of the kids who had volunteered to speak, a young girl named Zoe. Zoe was one of the shyest members of the group, but she had grown in confidence thanks to the mentorship program. Jasmine knew that her story would resonate with everyone in the room. "Zoe," Jasmine said, nodding toward her, "why don't you tell us about your journey?" Zoe stepped up to the microphone, her hands shaking slightly as she adjusted the mic stand. She looked out at the crowd, then down at the paper in her hands. She had written out her story, but the words on the page didn't seem to matter anymore. The sincerity in her voice as she spoke to the room was far more powerful. "Before the program, I didn't know who I was," Zoe said, her voice soft but steady. "I felt like I was invisible. My parents didn't have time for me, and I didn't have anyone to talk to. I was just lost. But then I met Ms. Jasmine, and she listened to me. She made me feel like I mattered. I started learning how to speak up, how to trust people again. And now, I know I want to help others like I was helped." There was a silence in the room as everyone absorbed her words. Jasmine could feel the tears welling up in her eyes, but she blinked them away, focusing on Zoe as she stepped down from the stage. The crowd erupted in applause, and Jasmine felt a spark of hope light inside her. Zoe's words had struck a chord with the audience. This was bigger than just a few kids, it was about a community coming together to support something that mattered. Other kids followed Zoe's lead, each of them telling their stories with a mixture of vulnerability and strength. From Marcus, who had turned his life around after struggling with a troubled past, to Ava, who had found her passion for teaching others through the program, the room became filled with powerful, raw testimonies that painted a picture of what the program had truly accomplished. Jasmine could feel the energy in the room shifting. She could sense that the people who had come in skeptical or indifferent were beginning to see the impact the program had on the kids. And that was exactly what they needed. After the kids had finished speaking, Jasmine took the stage once more, her resolve stronger than ever. She looked around the room, making eye contact with the key people who could make a difference, local business owners, parents, and teachers. "Thank you to all of the kids who shared their stories," Jasmine said, her voice filled with gratitude. "What you've heard today isn't just a collection of personal stories. It's a reality we can't ignore. These kids, these amazing young people, are our future. And it's up to us to decide what kind of future we want to create for them." She paused for a moment, letting her words sink in. "I know that there are financial concerns. I know that we have to be practical. But we also have to ask ourselves, what is the cost of losing these kids? What is the price of a future where they don't have the support they need? We've seen what they're capable of when we give them the resources, the mentorship, and the love they deserve. And if we allow this program to be taken away from them, we're letting them down." Jasmine took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. "So, I ask you all here today, what kind of community do we want to be? Do we want to be the kind of place that gives up on our kids when things get tough, or do we want to be the kind of place that rises up, together, to make sure they have every chance to succeed?" Her words hung in the air like a challenge, and for a moment, the room was still. Then, slowly, one by one, people began to stand. Parents, mentors, teachers, business owners, all of them were joining in, rallying behind the kids. This was it. Jasmine could feel the momentum building. They weren't going to let this program go without a fight. The following week, Jasmine and her team got to work. They were determined to show the community and the funding organizations the overwhelming support for the program. They printed petitions, created flyers, and shared the kids' stories on social media. They used every tool at their disposal to keep the momentum going. Jasmine also made sure to keep the pressure on Mr. Carson. She wasn't going to let him and his team dismantle the program without a serious fight. She began attending local council meetings, gathering more support from other community organizations, and even reaching out to local media outlets. Every day felt like a battle, but Jasmine knew she had to keep pushing. But it wasn't just about the numbers, it was about making sure the voices of the kids were heard. That was their strongest weapon. Jasmine knew that if they could make people feel what she had felt when she first saw the kids walk into the program, they could win. The kids' stories were powerful enough to change minds. A week later, the community was buzzing with anticipation. The town hall meeting had gone viral. Local businesses were donating, and more families were getting involved. The petition had already garnered thousands of signatures. The support was undeniable. And then, just as things were starting to look like they might turn around, Mr. Carson made his move. He called Jasmine into his office for a meeting. She wasn't surprised. The writing was on the wall, and she knew it was time for the final confrontation. She wasn't sure what he was going to say, but she was ready for whatever came next. When she walked into his office, Mr. Carson was sitting behind his desk, looking more serious than she had ever seen him. He didn't greet her with his usual charm or friendly smile. This time, he looked like a man who was ready for a fight. "Jasmine," he began, his voice cold, "I've been following the progress of the petition, and I see that you've garnered quite a bit of support. But I need to remind you that we have to look at the bigger picture here." Jasmine's pulse quickened. She wasn't going to let him intimidate her. She had come too far. "I don't need reminding, Mr. Carson," she said firmly. "I've seen the bigger picture. These kids, this program, they're worth fighting for." He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms across his chest. "I admire your passion, Jasmine. But at the end of the day, this is a business decision. And I'm not sure your passion is enough to save it." Jasmine stood tall, feeling a fire build within her. "Then I'll prove you wrong," she said, her voice unwavering. "This program is more than just a business. It's a lifeline for these kids. And I won't stop fighting until you see that. Mr. Carson paused, then gave a slow, knowing smile. You've got spirit, I'll give you that. But it's not enough. Let's see how far your spirit will take you. Jasmine knew this wasn't going to be easy, but she was ready. She was about to face her greatest challenge yet, and this time, she wasn't going down without a fight. The battle for the future of the mentorship program had just entered its final, most crucial phase. The battle for the mentorship program had escalated to a level Jasmine had never anticipated. She was no longer just a mentor, she was now a leader, a spokesperson, and a warrior fighting for the future of the kids she'd grown so close to. Every conversation she had, every meeting she attended, and every rally she led brought her closer to the truth. This wasn't just about saving a program, it was about redefining what was possible for the youth in her community. The phone call from Mr. Carson had shaken her, but it had also steeled her resolve. The more he dismissed her passion, the more determined she became to prove him wrong. Jasmine wasn't going to let him reduce this fight to numbers on a spreadsheet. The kids' lives and futures were worth so much more than that. The following days were a blur of activity. Jasmine was meeting with local businesses, speaking with parents, and gathering volunteers for upcoming rallies and events. She knew the clock was ticking, and she needed to keep the momentum alive. But despite the outward show of strength, doubt lingered in the back of her mind. What if it wasn't enough? What if the weight of money and power was too much for them to overcome? That doubt was erased one afternoon when she received a call from Ms. Adams. Jasmine, you're not going to believe this, Ms. Adams said, excitement in her voice. I just spoke with someone from the city council. They're willing to listen. They want to meet with you. This could be our chance to make a real difference. Jasmine felt her heart leap. This was it. This was the opportunity she had been waiting for. They're going to listen to us, she asked, barely able to contain her excitement. Yes, Ms. Adams confirmed. But we need to act fast. We can't waste any time. Get ready for a full-on presentation. We need to show them what we've built here and why it's worth fighting for. Jasmine immediately called a meeting with the mentors. They needed to strategize for this meeting. This was their chance to finally speak directly to the people who could save the program. The stakes had never been higher. The day of the council meeting arrived, and the pressure was on. Jasmine stood in front of a group of parents, mentors, and community members, nervously adjusting her jacket. She had spent the past few days preparing for this moment, practicing her speech, rehearsing the kids' stories, and ensuring that every detail was in place. Remember, she said to the group, her voice calm but determined, we're not just here to talk about a program. We're here to show them what's at risk. These kids are the future, and they deserve every opportunity to succeed. The meeting room was full, and as Jasmine walked in with her group, she could feel the eyes of the council members upon her. Mr. Carson was seated near the front, a stern look on his face, and for the first time, Jasmine could feel the weight of his gaze as she made her way to the podium. But she didn't flinch. She had come too far to let him intimidate her now. Jasmine cleared her throat and began. Good afternoon, members of the City Council. My name is Jasmine, and I'm here today to speak on behalf of the mentorship program that has transformed the lives of so many young people in this community. She paused, letting the words sink in. She could see some council members shifting uncomfortably in their seats, but Jasmine refused to let their skepticism derail her. Over the past few years, she continued, we have helped hundreds of kids discover their potential. We've given them the tools to succeed, tools that have made a tangible difference in their lives. But now, that opportunity is in jeopardy. The funding for our program is on the line, and if we lose it, we're not just losing a service, we're losing a future. She turned to the side, motioning for the first of the kids to step forward. MOCKS, who had grown up in the foster care system and had turned his life around through the program, stood up and walked to the podium. His presence was powerful. Marcus had become one of the most vocal advocates for the program, and his story had already inspired many. He looked out at the council members with a quiet intensity, and when he spoke, his words rang with sincerity. Before the program, I was heading down a dark path, Marcus began. I didn't care about school. I didn't care about anything. But Ms. Jasmine and the mentors, they saw something in me I didn't even see in myself. They didn't give up on me, and they gave me the guidance I needed to turn my life around. If this program goes, kids like me will have no hope. There was a long silence after Marcus finished. Jasmine could feel the weight of his words settle over the room. She knew this was their chance to make a real impact. But the next speaker, Ava, stepped forward and continued their powerful testimony. I was just like Marcus, Ava said, her voice full of emotion. I didn't have anyone to help me when I was younger. But when I got involved in this program, everything changed. I found a purpose, and I found my voice. I learned how to teach and help other kids the way I was helped. Without this program, I wouldn't be the person I am today. Jasmine watched as the council members exchanged glances, some of them clearly moved by the stories the kids were telling. She had hoped for this moment, but now that it was happening, it felt surreal. The realization that the kids' stories were connecting with these powerful people gave her a sense of hope. Perhaps they were starting to understand. But as the meeting continued, it became clear that the battle was far from over. Mr. Carson spoke up, his voice calm and measured. While I understand the emotional weight of these stories, he said, we have to be realistic. The program is expensive, and we need to make decisions based on financial feasibility. We can't keep throwing money at something that doesn't generate a return. Jasmine's heart sank as she heard his words. It was the same old argument, but this time, it felt different. He wasn't just talking about numbers. He was questioning the very essence of what the program stood for. That's where you're wrong, Mr. Carson, Jasmine said, her voice rising with passion. The return on investment isn't about money. It's about lives. It's about the future. Every kid we help is one less kid on the streets, one less kid who might fall into a life of crime. The value of this program can't be measured in dollars. The room was silent, and Jasmine could see the council members looking at each other, their expressions uncertain. She knew that she had struck a chord, but she wasn't done yet. She pulled out a stack of petitions, each one signed by hundreds of community members who supported the program. This isn't just about us in this room, she said, her voice strong. This is about the entire community. We've got hundreds of people who believe in this program. We've got businesses, teachers, families, and most importantly, the kids themselves. This is their future, and we're not going to let it slip away. She placed the petitions on the table in front of the council members, watching as they flipped through the pages. It was a small act, but it spoke volumes. The community had spoken. And it was louder than anything Mr. Carson could argue. The days after the council meeting were filled with uncertainty, but Jasmine refused to let doubt creep in. She knew that the fight was far from over, and she had no intention of giving up. As she sat in her office late one evening, going over her notes and preparing for the next steps, a notification flashed on her phone. It was an email from an unfamiliar name, Jennifer Hughes, local news reporter. Jasmine clicked on the message with a mixture of curiosity and caution. She hadn't expected much attention from the media, but if someone was reaching out, it could be the break they needed. Subject: a story that needs to be told. Dear Jasmine, I've been following the recent developments surrounding the mentorship program and your efforts to save it. I've had the privilege of speaking with several of the kids who've benefited from it, and I'm deeply moved by their stories. I'd like to meet with you for an interview. Perhaps we can shed light on this issue and get more people involved. The public needs to hear about this, and I'd love to help tell the story. Best regards. Jennifer Hughes, local news reporter. Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. This was it. A story like this could reach hundreds, even thousands, of people. It could be the tipping point, the moment the community began to see the program not as an expense but as an investment in their collective future. She immediately typed out a response. Subject, a story that needs to be told. Dear Jennifer. Thank you so much for reaching out. I would be honored to meet with you and share the stories of the kids and the program. We believe this story is one that can inspire people to act and make a real difference in our community. I'm available to meet anytime this week, so please let me know when would be convenient for you. Looking forward to it. Jasmine. The next morning, Jasmine woke up with renewed energy. The news segment could be the catalyst they needed. She immediately began organizing her thoughts, preparing her key points for the interview, and ensuring the kids would be involved in the segment. Their voices were the strongest asset they had. Later that week, Jasmine met with Jennifer at a small, quiet cafe in town. Jennifer, a woman in her early 30s with a warm smile and a sense of purpose, greeted Jasmine as she sat down. I've been following your work for a while, Jasmine, Jennifer said, opening her notebook. What you're doing is incredible. But I think the public still doesn't fully understand what's at stake here. These kids, they deserve a voice, and I think it's time we give it to them. Jasmine nodded, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over her. This was exactly what they needed, someone who would amplify the kids' stories in a way that could resonate with the broader community. So, tell me more about the program, Jennifer said as she began recording. What makes it so special? Jasmine leaned forward, eager to tell the story. It's not just about mentoring, she began. It's about giving kids who have been overlooked and forgotten a chance to find their voice, their purpose. They come from all walks of life, some have faced hardship, others have been marginalized, but the one thing they all share is a hunger for something more. We provide them with the tools to succeed, mentorship, education, support. And most importantly, we give them hope. Jennifer asked her questions, probing deeper into the impact the program had on the kids and the community. Jasmine spoke from the heart, talking about the kids' successes and how they had blossomed with the right guidance. She emphasized the resilience and strength the kids had shown, even in the face of obstacles. As the interview wrapped up, Jennifer looked at her notes and smiled. This is going to be a great story, Jasmine. We're going to get people to pay attention. Jasmine felt a sense of relief flood over her. This was more than just a local news story, it was the beginning of a movement. If they could get the community's attention, they might just have enough support to save the program. The following week, Jennifer's segment aired on the local news. Jasmine watched, her heart racing, as the story unfolded on screen. The camera zoomed in on the kids, some nervously speaking about how the program had changed their lives, others filled with a quiet confidence as they described their newfound sense of purpose. The most powerful part of the segment came when MOCKS was shown, standing tall and proud as he spoke about how he had gone from being a troubled teen to someone who was now mentoring younger kids in the program. It's more than just learning about schoolwork, MOCKS said on camera. It's learning how to be someone who believes in themselves. Ms. Jasmine and the mentors, they helped me believe in myself when I didn't think I had anything worth believing in. This program saved me, and it can save others too. The camera panned across the room as the kids listened to MOCKS, some of them with tears in their eyes. Jasmine could see the emotion in their faces, the quiet pride in their eyes. This wasn't just a program, it was a lifeline. When the segment ended, Jasmine felt a sense of relief, but it was fleeting. She knew that the real work had only just begun. The phone was already ringing off the hook with messages of support. Parents, teachers, local business owners, all of them were expressing their gratitude for the program and their desire to see it saved. The impact of the news segment was immediate. People were talking about the mentorship program. Local businesses began pledging support, offering to sponsor events and contribute financially. Parents were showing up at council meetings, speaking out in favor of the program. It seemed like the entire community was rallying behind them. But not everyone was on board. Mr. Carson, still standing in opposition, issued a statement following the news segment. While the program's impact on the individual lives of these students is undeniable, we must remain focused on fiscal responsibility. We cannot continue to fund a program that is not self-sustaining. Jasmine knew this was coming. Mr. Carson had made his position clear. But now, the community was fully behind them. They had the momentum. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Jasmine and her team met with local businesses, organized rallies, and continued to tell the stories of the kids who had benefited from the program. There was still no official decision from the city council, but Jasmine felt the tide beginning to turn. One evening, as Jasmine sat in her office, her phone buzzed with a new email. It was from the city council. Her heart raced as she opened the message. Subject: Upcoming vote on mentorship program funding. Dear Jasmine, we would like to invite you to attend the upcoming City Council meeting where a vote will be held regarding the future of the mentorship program. Your advocacy has been noted, and we look forward to hearing from you at the meeting. Best regards. City Council Office. Jasmine's heart pounded as she read the email. This was it. The moment of truth had arrived. The vote would determine whether the mentorship program would continue or if it would be shut down. She took a deep breath and stood up, looking out the window. The stakes had never been higher, but one thing was certain: she wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not when so many people had fought so hard. Jasmine wasn't just fighting for the program. She was fighting for every kid whose life had been changed by the work they had done. The day of the council vote was unlike any Jasmine had ever experienced. The air in the city hall was thick with anticipation, and the sense of urgency was palpable. She sat in the audience, flanked by parents, mentors, and some of the kids who had become the faces of the mentorship program. Everyone was tense, their nerves raw, but their resolve unshaken. As the meeting was called to order, Jasmine felt a pang of nervousness in her chest, but she quickly reminded herself of the journey they had come through. She had stood up for these kids when no one else had, and now they had the entire community behind them. They had a chance, no, they had earned the chance to make a difference. The council members filed into the room, their faces as stoic as ever, but Jasmine could tell that the tension in the air had not gone unnoticed. Mr. Carson, sitting at the front, seemed determined to maintain his position. His cold, calculating demeanor hadn't changed, and Jasmine knew he would be a formidable opponent in this meeting. But today, something felt different. The room was filled with people, and the council chambers were packed with parents, teachers, students, and local business owners. The atmosphere was buzzing with nervous energy. Jasmine stood with her team in the back of the room, her eyes scanning the crowd. The news cameras were rolling, capturing every moment, and it made her both nervous and determined. Okay, let's do this, Jasmine whispered to herself, taking a deep breath. The mayor called the meeting to order, and everyone settled into their seats. A few moments of formalities passed before the mayor turned to the agenda for the day. Jasmine's heart skipped a beat as he called for the vote on the future of the mentorship program. We now turn to the issue at hand, the funding for the mentorship program. We've heard from Jasmine and the community about the benefits of this initiative, and we've seen the support it has garnered, the mayor said, his voice firm. It's time to hear the final statements from the council before we proceed with the vote. Jasmine stood up and walked to the front, her palms slightly sweaty but her head held high. She had already made her case in the previous council meetings, but now it was time to leave everything on the table. I stand here today not just as a mentor, but as someone who has seen firsthand the incredible transformation this program has had on so many lives, she began, her voice steady. This isn't just a program. It's a lifeline. The kids in this program aren't just the future of this community, they are this community. She paused for a moment, locking eyes with the council members. Jasmine could see a few of them nodding, their expressions softening, while others remained stoic, unmoved. For too long, we've been told that we need to make tough choices, that we need to cut costs, to make the numbers work, Jasmine continued, her voice rising slightly. But what we're really talking about here are lives. These kids deserve a chance. They deserve to know that we believe in them. And that's what this program is, it's an investment in the future of this city. Jasmine took a deep breath. This was the most critical moment of her life. She had to make them see what the kids represented, not just the statistics, not just the numbers, but the potential. Don't let them down, she said softly. Don't let our future slip away. This program works. And we can't afford to let go of something that is changing lives every single day. There was a silence in the room as Jasmine's words hung in the air. The council members exchanged looks, and she could tell that the weight of her plea had made an impact. But there was still more to come. Next, Mr. Carson stood. His posture was tall and rigid, his voice as cold as ever. I've listened to the testimonies. I've seen the support, and I understand the emotional appeal, he began, his tone calculated. But the reality is this, we can't continue funding programs that are unsustainable. We have to think about the financial stability of this city. I know it's hard to hear, but there are other priorities that must come first. Jasmine clenched her fists, but she refused to let his words rattle her. He wasn't going to win this. Not today. Mr. Carson continued, we cannot afford to subsidize a program that hasn't shown results in terms of measurable outcomes. The people in this room may have the best of intentions, but this city's future depends on being fiscally responsible. Jasmine's heart raced as he spoke. She knew that many of the council members had leaned toward his argument in the past. But she also knew that the kids in her program had already shown the kind of results that went far beyond what Mr. Carson was suggesting. The next few moments felt like they lasted forever. The council members discussed the issue amongst themselves. Some were clearly moved by the testimonies they had heard, while others remained focused on the financial aspects. Jasmine could feel the tension in the air, thick as fog. Her eyes kept shifting to the back of the room, where the kids sat, their faces a mixture of hope and uncertainty. Then, the mayor spoke up. We've heard all sides of this issue. It's clear that this is more than just a debate about dollars and cents. This is about the future of our young people. I will call for a vote. Jasmine held her breath as the council members prepared to cast their votes. The mayor called for the vote. The council members raised their hands one by one. Jasmine's pulse quickened as she watched each hand go up, or stay down. The first vote, yes. A wave of hope washed over her. Then another. Yes. Another. Yes. But then, as Jasmine's heart soared with the hope that victory was near, she saw Mr. Carson's hand stay firmly in the air. No. Her stomach twisted, but she didn't look away. She couldn't. This was too important. There were only a few more votes left. The next council member raised their hand. Yes. Another. Yes. And then, finally, the last vote. Jasmine's eyes locked onto the final council member, a woman who had been quiet throughout the entire debate. The room held its breath as she looked around, her eyes darting from the people in the room to the pile of petitions that Jasmine had submitted earlier. And then, to Jasmine's relief, the final vote came. Yes. A collective cheer erupted from the audience. Jasmine's heart skipped a beat, and tears welled up in her eyes as the room broke into applause. The mentorship program had been saved. The mayor smiled as he looked around the room. The vote has passed. The mentorship program will continue with full funding. Congratulations, Jasmine, and thank you to everyone who fought so hard for this cause. Jasmine stood there in stunned silence, the magnitude of what had just happened sinking in. It was over. The fight was won. The program was safe. The victory was sweet. It was the kind of triumph that people dream of, the kind where hard work, dedication, and unity pay off. Jasmine had fought for the mentorship program for months, and now the city council had voted in favor of its continued funding. The relief was overwhelming. The kids could keep attending, the mentors could keep guiding, and the community would continue to rally behind them. It was a celebration like no other. But Jasmine knew that the road ahead was still uncertain. The funding had been secured, but that didn't guarantee smooth sailing. In fact, she felt the weight of the future pressing down on her now more than ever. With the city's financial situation still fragile, there would undoubtedly be more battles ahead, battles for funding, for community support, and for the continued success of the program. As Jasmine left the city hall that evening, the glow of the streetlights above seemed to highlight the uncertainty that lay ahead. The victory was still fresh, and she felt a deep sense of pride. Yet there was a nagging feeling in the back of her mind: what next? The first few weeks after the vote were a blur. There were thank you letters to write, community events to attend, and new partnerships to establish. Jasmine was busier than ever, but she was grateful for it. Every step forward felt like a step toward something greater. She saw the kids in the program starting to feel more secure in their futures. There was hope in their eyes, something that hadn't been there before. One afternoon, as Jasmine sat in her office, her phone rang. She recognized the number immediately. It was Jennifer Hughes, the local news reporter who had helped get the word out about the program. "Hi, Jasmine." Jennifer greeted her with enthusiasm. "I wanted to touch base with you. I've been getting some interesting feedback from the community about the segment we did on the mentorship program, and I think we're onto something big here." Jasmine raised an eyebrow. "What kind of feedback?" "Well," Jennifer hesitated, "there's been talk. People are asking about the program's sustainability. While everyone loves the idea, there are concerns about how long the city will continue to fund it. Some business owners are willing to support, but they're looking for more concrete plans. There's a bit of skepticism that we need to address." Jasmine's stomach tightened. She had known this was coming. The funding might be secured for now, but in the long run, it would take more than just city support to keep the program afloat. They would need a sustainable model, one that didn't rely solely on the whims of local government. "I see," Jasmine replied, her mind racing. "Do you think there's a way to turn the conversation around? Can we show them that this program is more than just a temporary fix?" Jennifer sighed. "I think it's possible, but it's going to take a lot of work. We need to show them that the program has long-term value and is a crucial part of the city's future. If we can get the business community involved in a more meaningful way, maybe they'll see that supporting the program is an investment in the city's future." Jasmine's thoughts immediately turned to Marcus and the other kids. She had seen firsthand what this program could do, but she hadn't considered the long-term strategy. Now, it was clear, if they were going to keep this program alive, they needed more than just public opinion, they needed a solid foundation. That evening, Jasmine met with her team of mentors. They gathered around a table in the community center, the room lit by the soft glow of fluorescent lights. The kids, their families, and the mentors all knew that the victory was just the beginning. There was still so much work to do. They needed a plan. "I've been talking with some of the local business owners," Jasmine began, "and it's clear that we need to start building more partnerships, both financially and socially. But we also need to show them the real impact of this program, not just in terms of numbers but through real stories, the stories of the kids whose lives have changed." Marcus, sitting near the front, raised his hand. "We can help with that," he said confidently. "The kids in this program, we all have stories to tell. Stories of how this program has changed us. We can show them that we're not just taking from the city, we're giving back." Jasmine smiled at him. Marcus had always been a natural leader, and his words carried weight. "Exactly," she said. "Each of you has a story. Each of you has a unique experience that shows the power of what we're doing here. We need to get those stories out there, whether it's through social media, testimonials, or even more media coverage. As the meeting continued, Jasmine could see the determination in everyone's eyes. The kids were ready to step up, and the mentors were committed to helping them succeed. But Jasmine knew that building a long-term foundation for the program would require more than just heart and passion. It would require strategic planning, outreach, and community involvement on a larger scale. Over the next few weeks, Jasmine worked tirelessly with her team. They reached out to local businesses, offering opportunities for sponsorships and partnerships. They also began crafting a sustainable fundraising plan, one that included grants, private donations, and corporate sponsorships. Jasmine also partnered with other local organizations to build a network of support, ensuring that the program had multiple streams of funding and resources. One night, after a long day of meetings, Jasmine sat down at her desk, exhausted but satisfied. Her phone buzzed, and she saw a message from Jennifer. It read, "I have a huge opportunity for the program. There's a local charity gala coming up, and they want to feature your mentorship program as one of the main causes. It's a great chance to showcase what you're doing and secure some serious funding. Are you in?" Jasmine's eyes lit up. This was exactly the kind of opportunity they needed, a high-profile event that could put the program in front of influential community members and potential donors. It was a game-changer. She immediately replied, "Count me in." The weeks leading up to the gala were filled with excitement. Jasmine and her team worked around the clock to prepare. The kids were practicing their speeches, and the mentors were gathering materials for their presentations. The community rallied behind them, and the support was overwhelming. The night of the gala arrived, and Jasmine couldn't help but feel a mixture of excitement and nerves. She knew that this was more than just another event, it was the future of the mentorship program. As Jasmine entered the elegant ballroom, she took in the sight of the well-dressed crowd. The room buzzed with conversation, and the air was thick with anticipation. She could see the city's most influential business owners and philanthropists in attendance, and it was clear that they were eager to learn more about the program. Jasmine felt a tap on her shoulder and turned to see Marcus standing beside her, dressed in a sharp suit. "You ready, Ms. Jasmine?" he asked with a grin. Jasmine smiled back, feeling a rush of pride. "Let's do this." As the evening unfolded, Jasmine and her team presented the mentorship program to the attendees. They shared the stories of the kids, stories of struggle, resilience, and success. The room was captivated. People were moved, inspired by the kids' courage and the dedication of the mentors who had helped them along the way. When the speeches ended, the room erupted in applause. People were asking questions, offering donations, and expressing their support. It was clear that the mentorship program was no longer just a local initiative, it was a movement. By the end of the night, Jasmine had secured pledges for future funding in several new partnerships. As she walked out of the gala, her heart soared. The program's future was more secure than ever, and Jasmine knew that they were on the path to something even greater. The next few months were a whirlwind. What had started as a grassroots initiative, a community-driven program designed to mentor at-risk youth, was now something bigger, something more ambitious. Jasmine had managed to secure local funding, and through her efforts, the mentorship program had started to gain national attention. A local charity gala had propelled them forward, but now, they were fielding inquiries from other cities. Everyone wanted to know how a small city like theirs had managed to turn a fledgling mentorship program into a shining example of success. Jasmine sat in her office one morning, reviewing the latest emails, feeling overwhelmed but invigorated. There were sponsorship offers from national companies, invitations to conferences, and media requests from everywhere. Her phone rang, breaking her concentration. "Hey, Jasmine," Marcus said excitedly when she answered. "You're not going to believe this. There's a big foundation in New York that wants to feature our program in their upcoming annual conference. They want to bring us in as one of the keynote speakers." Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. A national stage was exactly what they needed. The foundation was known for funding innovative youth initiatives, and if they could be featured there, it could elevate their work to new heights. Not only would it bring in funding, but it would also give the program the credibility and visibility it deserved. "That's incredible," Jasmine replied, her voice tinged with awe. "We've worked so hard to get here. I can't believe this is really happening." Marcus laughed. "I know. This is huge. But they're asking for a presentation. They want to hear directly from the kids, how the program has changed their lives. I think it's a perfect opportunity to show the world what we've been doing." Jasmine leaned back in her chair, thinking about how much the program had evolved. It wasn't just a project anymore, it was a movement. And it was all thanks to the kids like Marcus who had taken ownership of it. Preparing for the conference in New York was no small task. Jasmine and her team worked tirelessly to create a presentation that would be both compelling and meaningful. They wanted to show not just the success of the mentorship program but also the potential for it to be replicated across the country. The kids were nervous, but their excitement outweighed their fear. They had grown so much since the first days of the program, becoming not only better students but also better leaders. Jasmine could see how each one of them was evolving, and she felt an immense sense of pride. But she also knew this would be a defining moment for them. For the first time, these kids were going to be the ones who shaped the narrative. It was no longer just about Jasmine's fight for them, it was about their fight for their future. The day of the conference arrived, and the team boarded a flight to New York City. The towering skyline and busy streets were a far cry from the small town they called home. As Jasmine stepped out of the taxi, her mind raced. This was it, the stage was set, and everything they had worked for was leading up to this moment. The conference hall was massive, with hundreds of people from all over the country gathered to discuss youth empowerment and community-driven initiatives. Jasmine could feel the pressure mounting, but she refused to let it overwhelm her. They had come too far for that. As they took the stage, Jasmine looked out at the sea of faces before her. Some were skeptical, some curious, and some eager to hear the success stories. But she knew that the moment the kids began speaking, their authenticity would win everyone over. Marcus stood first, his voice steady as he began telling his story. "When I first joined the program," he said, "I didn't know if anyone cared about me. I didn't think I had much of a future. But then I met Jasmine and the mentors. They believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. And now, I'm on track to go to college. Not just because of the program, but because I know now that I matter." The room was silent. Jasmine's heart swelled with pride as Marcus spoke. He had grown into such a confident, articulate young man, and his words were powerful. As he finished, the audience erupted in applause. The other kids followed, sharing their own stories of how the mentorship program had changed their lives. Each story was unique, but they all had one thing in common, the unshakable belief that they had a future worth fighting for. After the presentation, Jasmine was approached by several people, foundations, business leaders, and even policymakers. The impact of their stories was undeniable, and the room buzzed with excitement about the potential for the program to expand. One person, in particular, stood out to Jasmine. A tall, well-dressed woman with a friendly smile introduced herself as Elizabeth Daniels, a philanthropist and social impact investor based in New York. "Jasmine," she said, shaking her hand, "your program is incredible. I've been involved in youth empowerment for years, but what you've done here is something special. I'd love to talk more about how we can help scale this. There's a lot of potential to bring this to other cities." Jasmine was stunned. Elizabeth was exactly the kind of person they needed to take the program to the next level. She exchanged contact information and promised to follow up once they were back home. That evening, Jasmine reflected on everything that had transpired. The recognition they had received at the conference was only the beginning. The program was ready for growth, but that growth would come with its own set of challenges. The bigger they became, the more they would need to ensure that the values and integrity of the program remained intact. Back in her hotel room, Jasmine pulled out her notebook and started jotting down ideas. There were logistical issues to consider, like how to replicate the program in other cities, how to build sustainable funding models, and how to ensure quality control as the program expanded. But she also thought about the heart of the program, the kids. They were the reason they had all fought so hard, and they were the ones who needed to lead the way. As much as Jasmine had been the driving force, it was clear to her now that the future of the program lay in their hands. It was time to start empowering the kids to take on even more leadership roles. She smiled to herself as she wrote down her thoughts: empower the kids. Expand strategically. Stay true to the mission. The excitement of the national conference in New York had barely settled when the real work began. Jasmine had to harness the energy from the spotlight and turn it into something sustainable. The mentorship program was no longer just a local initiative, it was now on the map, attracting interest from cities across the country. But with that newfound attention came greater responsibility. The pressure was mounting, and Jasmine knew that if they were going to expand successfully, they needed to build a solid foundation for the future. The first step was bringing together a strategic advisory board. Jasmine wanted to surround herself with people who understood both the challenges and the opportunities of scaling the program. She reached out to leaders in education, social services, philanthropy, and even business. She needed their expertise and connections to make the program's vision a reality. One evening, she sat in her office, preparing for an upcoming board meeting. The room was filled with papers, proposals, and plans for expansion. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was Marcus. "Hey, Ms. Jasmine," he said, his voice light but with an edge of excitement. "I've been thinking about something. What if we started a peer mentorship program? You know, get some of the older kids in the program to help the younger ones. It could help build leadership skills, and they could start giving back more." Jasmine smiled at Marcus' initiative. It was exactly the kind of thinking that could drive the program's success. "I love that idea, Marcus. Let's bring it up at the next board meeting. It could be a key part of the expansion." The idea of peer mentorship wasn't just about developing leadership skills in the older kids, it was about creating a sense of ownership within the program. It was also about reinforcing the community aspect of the initiative. As the program expanded, Jasmine wanted to make sure that it didn't lose the intimate, family-like atmosphere that had made it so special in the first place. The board meeting the following week was a pivotal moment. The room was filled with passionate, driven individuals, all eager to take the program to the next level. Jasmine stood before them, presenting the plans for expansion and the results from the national conference. "We've seen incredible success," she began, "but now, we need to build on that momentum. We're not just talking about replication, we're talking about scaling in a way that maintains the integrity of the program and the values that have brought us here." She outlined the peer mentorship idea and how it could help empower the kids by giving them more responsibility. The older students, many of whom had grown up in similar circumstances as the younger kids, would be able to mentor and guide them through their own challenges. This would not only benefit the younger kids but also help the older ones develop invaluable leadership and communication skills. By creating a model where the older kids take ownership of the program, we create a self-sustaining cycle of growth, Jasmine said. It's not just about helping these kids now, it's about preparing them to be leaders in their own communities in the future. The board was intrigued. Many of the members had worked with youth initiatives before, but none had ever seen a program that combined mentorship and leadership development in such a powerful way. They saw the potential and unanimously agreed to move forward with the plan. Over the next several weeks, Jasmine and her team began implementing the peer mentorship program. They identified the older kids who had shown leadership potential and began training them on how to mentor others. It wasn't just about teaching, they were also learning valuable lessons themselves. Jasmine had always believed that leadership wasn't just about giving direction, it was about inspiring and empowering others to find their own path. The first group of peer mentors was nervous but eager to get started. Marcus, who had grown into a natural leader, was one of the first to step up. Jasmine watched him as he worked with the younger kids, guiding them through tasks, offering advice, and sharing his own story. It was like watching him pass the torch, and Jasmine couldn't have been prouder. While the peer mentorship program was taking off, Jasmine's team was also focusing on the logistical side of scaling the program. They had already received inquiries from several cities that were interested in adopting the model. They needed to create a structured framework that could be easily replicated, without losing the personal touch that had made the program so successful. Jasmine worked with her advisory board to design a scalable model. They created a manual, training programs, and a set of best practices for other cities to follow. They also started reaching out to potential partners, corporations, foundations, and local governments, that could provide financial backing and help facilitate the expansion. But even as the program began to grow, Jasmine remained focused on the most important part, the kids. She continued to meet with them regularly, checking in on their progress and making sure they felt heard. She wanted them to understand that no matter how big the program became, it would always be about their success. A few months later, Jasmine found herself standing before a group of city leaders from Chicago, Dallas, and Atlanta, presenting the mentorship program as a model for expansion. The room was filled with potential allies, people who could make or break the program's growth. Jasmine started by sharing the story of Marcus, his transformation from a shy, uncertain teenager to a confident leader. She talked about the ripple effect the program had created, how it had not only changed the lives of the kids but had also strengthened the community as a whole. As we expand, we need to stay true to our roots, Jasmine said. We can't forget that this program isn't just about funding or numbers, it's about changing lives. It's about showing these kids that they are worthy of success and that they have the power to shape their own futures. As she spoke, Jasmine felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was bigger than her, bigger than the small town they had started in. This was about creating a movement, a national movement, one that could change the course of countless young lives. Back home, the program's success was already starting to bear fruit. The peer mentorship initiative had been a resounding success, with older students thriving in their new roles. Jasmine was hearing stories of how these students were going above and beyond, helping each other with schoolwork, offering emotional support, and even starting their own initiatives within the program. The future looked brighter than ever. But Jasmine knew that with every new challenge, there would be new lessons to learn, new obstacles to overcome. The journey wasn't over, it was just beginning. The road to national recognition was only the first step. As the program expanded to new cities, Jasmine's vision was clear. This was about creating a lasting impact on the lives of the kids, one community at a time. The whirlwind of success was a double-edged sword. While Jasmine and the team were riding high on the momentum of their expansion, they soon discovered that the larger they grew, the more complex the challenges became. As the mentorship program spread to new cities and attracted more attention, Jasmine faced obstacles she hadn't anticipated: bureaucratic red tape, logistical issues, and even some growing pains within the program itself. It all started with the first wave of expansion into Chicago. Although the city's youth services were excited to partner with the program, the logistics of coordinating between so many different regions proved to be more difficult than Jasmine had imagined. They struggled to maintain the level of individualized attention that had made the program so successful. "Jasmine, we've got a problem," Marcus said, his voice tense on the phone. "The kids in Chicago are struggling. They're not getting the same level of mentorship that we're providing here. I know we have all these new peer mentors, but we need to make sure they're ready for this. They don't have the experience." Jasmine knew Marcus was right. The success of their program wasn't just about scaling, it was about ensuring that the quality of mentorship stayed consistent. It wasn't enough to just expand and hope that things would fall into place. Sitting at her desk, surrounded by files, spreadsheets, and city proposals, Jasmine realized that this was the moment of truth. Was this program truly scalable? Could they replicate the magic of their local success across a country that was so varied in its needs and challenges? Jasmine immediately set up a series of calls with the team in Chicago. She needed to understand exactly where the breakdowns were happening. The first call revealed that while the peer mentors in Chicago were eager to help, many were still trying to adjust to their new roles. They didn't have the same level of training or mentorship that had been given to the peer mentors back home. The distance between the cities also created a barrier. Jasmine couldn't be everywhere at once. The solution, Jasmine quickly realized, wasn't just more training, it was about creating a more sustainable and self-sufficient model. They needed to establish a strong local leadership presence in each city that could oversee the day-to-day operations of the program and ensure the mentors were supported. With this new insight, Jasmine drafted a proposal to hire local program directors who would be trained in the specific needs of each city but would also be held to the same high standards that the original program had set. These directors would be responsible for training mentors, organizing community events, and ensuring that the kids received the level of mentorship they deserved. It wasn't a quick fix, but it was a step in the right direction. Meanwhile, Jasmine continued to receive updates from other cities that were beginning to implement the program. Some cities were doing well, while others struggled. The challenges weren't always the same. Some cities had better community support, while others faced more severe budget constraints. There was no one-size-fits-all solution, and Jasmine knew that flexibility would be key to making this work on a larger scale. She worked closely with her advisory board, using their collective knowledge and experience to develop a set of guidelines that could be adapted based on each city's unique circumstances. They discussed everything from funding strategies to mentor recruitment to ensuring that the kids felt safe and supported. It was clear that the road ahead would be much harder than Jasmine had initially thought. She had to be strategic about which cities they expanded into and make sure that they had the proper infrastructure to support the program. They couldn't afford to burn out, nor could they afford to lose the integrity of the program. The pressure was mounting, and Jasmine began to feel the weight of it all. She often found herself staying late in her office, reviewing budgets and emails, trying to stay ahead of the curve. MOCKS and the other mentors were doing their part, but Jasmine knew that it would take more than just passion to make this work. It would take careful planning, resources, and an unwavering commitment to the mission. One evening, as she was preparing for yet another late-night meeting, Jasmine received an unexpected call from Elizabeth Daniels, the philanthropist who had supported the program's initial expansion. "Jasmine," Elizabeth said, her voice calm but with a hint of concern, "I've been hearing some feedback about the program's challenges in Chicago. How are you holding up?" Jasmine sighed, her hand running through her hair. "Honestly, Elizabeth, I'm not sure. The program is growing faster than I expected, and I'm struggling to keep up with everything. The kids are still amazing, and the mentors are doing great, but we've hit some roadblocks. We're still working out how to keep the quality high while expanding so quickly." Elizabeth paused, as if taking in Jasmine's words. "Listen, I've been where you are, and I know it's hard. But don't lose sight of the bigger picture. This is just a growing pain. You've built something incredible, and sometimes that means facing challenges that are hard to navigate. But I believe in you. You're not in this alone. Let me know if I can help with anything specific, whether it's funding or connecting you with the right people." Jasmine's throat tightened as she listened to Elizabeth's words. She was right, this wasn't going to be easy. But it wasn't supposed to be. Nothing that was truly worth it ever came without sacrifice. "Thank you, Elizabeth," Jasmine said, her voice steadier now. "Your support means the world to me. I just don't want to lose the heart of what we've built here." "You won't," Elizabeth reassured her. "You're a great leader, Jasmine. Don't forget that." The conversation with Elizabeth gave Jasmine a renewed sense of determination. The challenges were real, but they were not insurmountable. She had already overcome so much to get to this point, and she was not about to let a few roadblocks stand in the way of the program's future. The next day, Jasmine met with her team to discuss the proposed solutions. They brainstormed ideas, identified key resources, and outlined a clearer path forward for each city they were expanding into. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was necessary. And if they wanted to succeed, they had to adapt to the challenges as they came. Jasmine sat quietly in her office, staring out the window at the city skyline. The last few years had been a whirlwind of success, challenges, and growth. She had built something bigger than herself, a national mentorship program that was changing the lives of countless young people. But now, as the program continued to grow, Jasmine felt a deep sense of reflection. The journey that had started with just a small group of kids in a local community had transformed into a movement that was touching lives across the country. But was this really what she had imagined it would become? It was the quiet moments like this, moments when everything slowed down, that allowed her to step back and appreciate the long road she had traveled. She thought about the early days, the times when she wasn't sure if she was doing the right thing. She remembered the faces of the kids who had believed in her before anyone else did. She remembered the first day she met MOCKS, a shy teenager whose potential was buried beneath layers of self-doubt. And she remembered how, in the face of every obstacle, she kept pushing forward because she knew that the difference they were making was real. Now, looking at the impact they had had, Jasmine realized that the journey was never really about her at all. It was about the kids. It was about them taking the lead, finding their own voices, and becoming leaders in their communities. It was about empowering them to believe that they could create change, not just in their own lives but in the lives of others. Over the past year, Jasmine had watched as many of the peer mentors began to take ownership of the program in ways she hadn't anticipated. They had become the heart of the initiative, supporting the younger kids, organizing events, and creating new opportunities for those who came after them. They had grown into leaders in their own right, and it was inspiring to see how much they had evolved since those early days. MOCKS, in particular, had flourished. His quiet determination and natural leadership qualities had made him a cornerstone of the program. Jasmine watched him closely as he led a workshop for new mentors in one of the cities. He was no longer the shy kid she had met all those years ago. Now, he was a young man who was confident in his ability to guide and inspire others. Jasmine felt a wave of pride as she watched him interact with the new mentors, listening to them, guiding them, just as she had once guided him. "Jasmine, you ever think about how far we've come?" MOCKS asked her one evening after the workshop. Jasmine smiled, leaning back in her chair. "Every day. But you've come farther than I ever imagined. You're doing great things, MOCKS. You're leading them now." MOCKS nodded, a humble grin on his face. "I just want to make sure the next group gets it right, you know. I've been where they are. I've struggled. But I also know that I wouldn't be here if you hadn't believed in me first." The words hit Jasmine harder than she expected. She had spent so much time focusing on the logistics of growth, the challenges of scaling, and the future of the program. But in that moment, she realized that the heart of the program was not in the numbers or the accolades, it was in the relationships, the growth of the individuals who had passed through it. As the program reached more cities and impacted more lives, Jasmine found herself thinking more about the long-term legacy of the mentorship initiative. What would this look like in 10 years? In 20 years? She had always believed that true change didn't happen overnight, it was a slow process of nurturing, teaching, and empowering. But in 10 years, what would it look like if all the kids who had been mentored, all the peer leaders, and all the communities that had been impacted by the program were still carrying the torch? She imagined a network of young leaders, scattered across the country, each carrying the lessons they had learned and passing them on to the next generation. She imagined a future where the program's impact rippled outward, transforming not just individuals but entire communities. Jasmine smiled to herself as she realized that this was her true legacy, creating a cycle of change that would continue long after she was gone. It wasn't about recognition or accolades, it was about empowering others to lead, to teach, and to inspire. She had built something that would live on through the people who had been a part of it. They would be the ones to continue the work, to make the world a better place, and to ensure that the program's mission would never fade. As the years passed, the mentorship program continued to grow and evolve, but it always stayed true to the values that Jasmine had instilled from the very beginning. She stayed involved, guiding and advising when needed, but more and more, it was the young people who had been mentored who took the reins. They were the ones who were out there, making a difference, leading their communities, and carrying the lessons of mentorship forward. The impact of the program was undeniable. Former mentors had become teachers, social workers, community organizers, and entrepreneurs, each using the skills they had learned to create positive change in their own ways. Jasmine often received updates from alumni, hearing stories about how they were now mentoring others, paying forward the lessons they had learned. It was a beautiful cycle, one that Jasmine could not have been prouder of. One day, many years after the program had begun, Jasmine was invited to speak at a national conference on youth mentorship. As she stood on the stage, looking out at the sea of faces, she saw not only the students she had mentored but also the many new faces who had taken on leadership roles within the program. She took a deep breath before addressing the crowd. "When I started this program," she began, "I didn't know what it would become. I didn't know how many lives it would touch. But I did know one thing: I believed in every single one of you. I believed that you had the power to change the world." She paused for a moment, letting the weight of her words settle in. "Because you do. And the change you're creating today is just the beginning. What we've built together is bigger than any one person. It's about a community, a movement, and a legacy. You are the future. And I know that because of you, this work will continue. The cycle of mentorship will continue." The audience erupted in applause, but Jasmine was already thinking ahead. The legacy wasn't about her, it was about the people who had been touched by the program, the leaders who would continue to rise, and the impact they would have on generations to come. Jasmine smiled, knowing that, even if her work was done, it had never truly been about her at all. The program had grown because of the belief, the trust, and the shared vision of everyone who had been a part of it. And in the end, that was what made it truly powerful, the ripple effect of mentorship that would continue to spread, one life at a time. The journey was full circle. And the future was bright. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?